1. Last night I couldn't sleep at all, which is fairly normal since I work graveyard shifts, and it's pretty much turned me into a night owl. So even on my days off, I'm usually up all night long. So I'm up in bed watching a rom-com, laughing and in a great mood, and decided that I deserve to treat myself to the occasional drink. My bar is in my basement, which is fully finished and furnished. It's pretty much a man cave. I spent entire nights down there by myself or with the gang, and nothing strange has ever happened. So anything creepy or weird down there was absolutely the furthest thing from my mind. I finish laughing my butt off and head down there. I go behind the bar, pour myself a drink, and head upstairs. But as I'm on the second to last step to the first floor, from behind me I hear, "Hey!" coming from downstairs in the middle of the basement. It was an older man's voice, in their 50s, I think. I know the house is empty, except for me, and it scared the absolute shit out of me. I looked down there and nothing moved. No one spoke or came forward, and I freaked the fuck out. I jutted up to the last 2 steps and slammed the basement door closed. I was wondering, did I imagine that? Is there someone in my house? As I stand there panicking, I hear the same man's voice coming from down in the basement, but muffled by the floor. By the intonation, he asked a question, then continued to talk right after. He was talking to me. The question sounded something like, "Where are you going?" I couldn't make much out, especially what he said after that, but I was panicked, adrenaline pumping, and said, "Fuck this shit, someone broke into my house." I ran into the next room, grabbed my flashlight, my handy-dandy baseball bat, and headed the hell back down there. Silence. Just silence. Slowly, I turned on every light in every room down there, ready to bash some homeless man's head. I'm sorry to all the homeless people. But nothing. Every nook and corner checked, and the basement is completely empty, except for my panicking and heavily breathing ass. I nubbed out of there, locked myself in my bedroom, and spent the next hour in crisis mode checking my basement cameras, which showed nothing and no one except for me pouring myself a drink, and then coming back down there and running like a madman with a bat a minute later. I went down to the basement this afternoon after I woke up, with my trusty bat in hand, and rechecked the whole place. I found nothing, no one, just me questioning both my sanity and reality. I know what I heard. That guy was pretty loud, and he was talking in my direction, even at me. Even through the door I heard him talking down there at me up the stairs. It seemed like he was trying to have a conversation with me. I've never had any kind of break-in. This is a very safe neighborhood, or any kind of remotely strange experience down there in my 15 years here. Does stuff like this happen to people out of the blue? Or am I finally losing my ever-loving mind? I don't know what to do. It happened at 1:50 a.m. At this point, I believe it most likely was paranormal, and I think I'm going to go down there tonight to repeat the same exact process, at the same time, and see what happens. My curiosity has gotten the better of me, and I want to know what he or it has to say. If it's actually an intruder, I'm coming prepared this time, but it should still be very interesting. When I went down, I was down there from 1:45 a.m. until 3 a.m., walking around, asking and looking, and nothing. Part of me feels like it needs the darkness or even just that element of unpredictability in order to manifest. Maybe it needs a build-up of energy, which it discharged last night. So it's tapped out right now. No idea. I have nothing to show for it tonight, but don't say that I didn't try. Feel free to ask any further questions. I'll keep a keen eye on the basement, and if anything happens now, you'll all absolutely hear from me. 2. Before my parents got divorced, we used to live in this house just outside of town. It was in between a rather busy street with lots of cars and a railway where trains used to pass, but we grew accustomed to the noise. When we moved here, it was just me, my parents, and my brother. Me and my brother used to share a room together on the first floor, since this was a house with only 2 bedrooms. But when my mother got pregnant and eventually gave birth to another brother, the issue was we couldn't share a room with 3 boys, so they decided to give me my own room, since I was the eldest. The house had only 2 floors with no spare rooms to use on the main floor, and only 3 rooms on the first floor. 2 of them already were bedrooms, me and my brother's room, and my parents' room. The third room, which apparently was used for storage from the previous owners, since the room was rather small. To be more precise, if you stretched your arms, you would be able to touch both walls of the room. My parents made this room into an office for my dad, which he never used, since he claimed he used to feel uncomfortable every time he used to stay there for an hour. As a surprise, they changed this room to my bedroom. They put a bunk bed with a desk under it so I could still work for school and have my own private place for myself. I was very happy with this. But then I started to understand what my dad meant. Staying for long in this room made you feel uneasy. I can't really explain it, just a random feeling of uneasiness. It started to get worse during the night. At random nights, during a random time, I would hear scratching at the door. At first I thought it was just someone of my family playing a prank on me. But this happened after midnight, and when the scratching stopped, I could never hear footsteps walking away or any door opening. The house was rather loud. The longer this went on, the more you could see it on the door. Huge scratching marks from the top of the door to the middle part, clearly showing that someone had been scratching at the door. This continued, and I've started to complain to my parents, to which they responded with, "Must have been the cat." The cat had no way of coming upstairs, and the scratch marks on the door were so high that if it was him, it would have been that he jumped to get up to that point since it was so high. Some years later, the scratching sounded louder, and when I started to pay attention, it seemed more like it came from inside the room. Like whatever was doing this was scratching the bunk bed itself. When I turned the lights on, there was no one there and the sound stopped. This continued, and the marks started to appear on the bed too, same as on the door, slowly getting closer to the ladder to get to the top of the bed. My parents again said, "You're doing this yourself." But one day I woke up with a sharp pain, and when I turned on the light, I saw my leg bleeding rather heavily. After screaming for my parents and cleaning the wound, they discovered that the wounds were the same scratch marks we saw on the door and on the bed frame, and seemed to be rather deep. I still have scars from this. After this, they moved me back to my old room, sharing it with my 2 brothers, and as soon as I changed, I have never heard the scratching sound again. We moved from there after the divorce, and none of us has ever set foot or slept in that room since then. 3. My house has always been a hotspot for strange things. They've been happening for 19 years. A few family members died in the house when I was 2 or 3, and me and my mom have seen multiple apparitions. The earliest event I remember was when my uncle came to visit when I was 10. He's a die-hard skeptic, taking every possible opportunity to explain away any possible event. While I was watching Ghost Adventures with my grandmother, he walked in the room, talking about how it was unrealistic and obviously fake. My grandmother asked him why, and he said, "Because ghosts don't exist." He then walked over to the dinner table, and a bulb from the light over the table exploded. We had just replaced all the bulbs a couple of hours earlier, and there were 3 other bulbs that were completely fine. It was only the bulb closest to his head. Another time, my sister had a nightmare, so I was laying on her bed next to her. A couple hours later, I saw a woman walk down the hallway, stop at the door, lock eyes with me, then turn and walk into the bathroom next to the room. Usually, I would be able to see the light turn on, or at least to see the light from under the door, especially at 3 a.m., but I didn't. I asked my family the next day if they went to the bathroom by my bedroom, and they didn't. It isn't the primary bathroom, since they have one in their room, and one in a hall closer to the family room downstairs. It would be strange of anyone to walk to the 2nd floor to use my bathroom, when there are 2 others much closer to everyone else. The next one happens every 2 or 3 years. The first time it happened, I was 14 during the summer before my freshman year of high school. I'd been staying up late and sleeping in, as one typically does during the summers. I remember watching Lilo and Stitch and seeing the shadow of a small child standing outside my door. When I cautiously said hello, it ran off. I remember a chill running down my spine and every part of my being telling me not to follow it. I've always had strong intuition, so I listened and continued watching the movie. An hour or so later, I heard a loud bang. I called out to see if one of the family members dropped something. Receiving no response. Against my better judgment, I walked downstairs to their rooms. They were all asleep. Since I was downstairs, I took the opportunity to grab some snacks, standing at the back corner of the kitchen with a little boy. I flipped the light on, seeing him disappear. I booked it out of that kitchen, leaving the light on and going back upstairs. The next morning, and by morning I mean around 2 p.m., I was making some eggs and my dad asked if I had scratched my leg on something. I said no, and looked at my leg to see what he was talking about. On the back of my leg there was a long scratch with a bit of dried blood around it. It spanned about 12 centimeters just above my ankle, running almost vertically at a bit of an angle. We saged and salted the house that night. We repeated that whenever I see it. It came back last month at about 4 a.m. while I was watching Hamilton, and I grabbed the jar of salt and my obsidian and evil eye necklace from my closet and drew a line of salt in front of my door and on my windowsill. I saged the house again the next morning. 4. This happened years ago, but I can't sleep and just remembered it. So for context, sometimes when I meet someone, I get these kind of pulses of information that I describe as a pressure on my third eye. Then it's like a flood of memories from the future, I guess. Nothing specific, just like an overwhelming sense about where things are headed. It's only happened to me 3 times, each time with someone that played a very emotional and distinct part in my life. I never thought much about it, but I always did feel like the information came from something higher than me, and something good. I always thought of it like my guardian angel or spirit guides. I don't know. Anyway, the second time it happened, I was meeting a guy at a bar. I instantly received the pulse and a warning, not against the guy, that he was a bad person, more like a warning that my life was taking a very dark and much more challenging turn if I pursued him, and I was about to get in deep over my head. But I liked him and felt drawn to him, so I ignored it and told myself I could handle it. Anyway, he's clearly in a deep depression and very lonely, suffering from very recent trauma, combat zone experiences, etc. Cut to a week or so later and I'm at his place, and he starts to get real loopy. I figure out that he had taken a painkiller since he just had surgery on his back a day ago. He mixed that with liquor and now was talking about the crew, etc. I was annoyed by his state and wanted to leave, but I had walked there, and it was a little too late for me to walk back safely. I figured even if he was talking about people that weren't in the room, he wasn't dangerous, so I would stay. This is where the telepathic experience happened. I turned my back to him, ignoring him, and planning to sleep and talk when he's coherent. He stops rambling, and I feel an intense pressure on my third eye. It comes with this information telling me to leave, that I shouldn't be involved with him, that he is only going to make my life miserable and bring me down with his depression. But this time it felt distinctly like the message was from him. I open my eyes while this is happening, and from the mirror I can see him half staring at me in a stupor. It only lasts a moment before the pulsing ends, and he says aloud, "Did you get the message?" I was feeling stubborn, I guess, and was already annoyed with him for being so out of it. So, a conversation ensued, something like, "What message?" "The message in the 4th dimension." "I don't know." "Yes, you got it." "So what are you going to do?" "Yeah, I got the message and I forgot it." "That ruins the whole point. You're supposed to remember the message so you can act. Cue his rambling belligerence. I remember being annoyed that he was telling me what to do with my life, let alone in a weird context with information that I already was aware of and had decided to ignore the first time. I never brought it up again until a few months later when he was leaving town. I was helping him pack. We were both drinking, and I mentioned something about the crew. He looked at me confused, asked how I knew about the crew. I told him he was talking about them aloud the night he was super fucked up, and told me in the fourth dimension that I should leave him. His face dropped, and his only reply was to call me smug, and say that he knew I got the message. I reconnected with him after a few years of going no contact. Good news is he's doing much better now, with his drinking and sobriety. Not perfect, but 10% of what he was back then. I did try to ask him about those 2 moments again, and he claims to have no idea what I'm talking about, and got very defensive when I mentioned the crew, so I dropped it. I always thought it was odd, because while he was on drugs when it happened, I was not. Yet I am the one with a distinct memory of it happening, or at least the only one who admits to remembering it happen. 5. This happened approximately 3 years ago. I live in Mesa, Arizona. I stepped out to walk the dog, as usual, on a warm May evening. The sun had just barely set. Something caught my eye southeast of me in the sky. What I saw was a very brightly lit, diamond-shaped something, sitting motionless and completely silent. My brain took a second or two to ask itself, WTF? As I continued to stare at this thing. Not a star or aircraft, that I can tell. I am an ex-Navy aircraft mech. It does something that intrigues me to this day. There was a flash in my vision which caused me to snap away from this light. My dog was oblivious. As I turned back around to see this thing again, all I saw was a distant light disappearing into the clouds. Here's the interesting part of the story. After seeing this, I called the fam outside, tripping about seeing a UFO, so we hang out and talk about it for 5 minutes, when suddenly 2 blacked-out F-16s fly directly through the airspace where I saw this. Whatever. We not only saw this as a group, the aircraft I mean, but also strange lights and aircraft for a few moments after we saw the fighter jets. Just gotta add this. When that light snapped around me, I couldn't help that reaction, by the way. I had bright blue horizontal after images behind my eyes for at least an hour. Go figure. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 347. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button and share the video with friends and family. And if you'd like to get the videos a little bit earlier, then you can support me through my Patreon, which is linked in the description. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store, and you can make donations during streams or videos like this one. While you never have to do this, I do appreciate it, and it helps me a lot. Alright, let's see. I think we do actually have a birthday shout-out today. Yes, October 6th. Okay, so today's shout-out goes to Gloria. I'm not sure how old Gloria is today, but younger than yesterday, I'm sure. I'm hoping you're having a great birthday, Gloria, and that George is certainly spoiling you on your special day, as you certainly deserve it. Make sure you're celebrating for at least the month. And then in November, because it's his birthday, you guys can then celebrate his for a month. So it works out pretty well for both of you. Now, before I go, I'd like to sing Happy Birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Gloria. Happy birthday to you. Alright, and before we go, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And this is one I retrieved from the tattered recesses of my mind. This was meant to be in this week's Koahu video, but somehow, occasionally I'll forget to save something as I'm recording, and that's not really a major problem. It happens very rarely, so that's just whatever. I was very tired, and so I'd done the outro for Koahu. Then I came up with the question of the day, and I completely forgot about it. And this troubled me because I'd also forgotten about something immediately after thinking about it the previous night. So what had happened is, regarding the outro, I'd forgot to save it, so I thought, oh, well, that's annoying, I'll just quickly re-record the outro. So I did it, and I got to the question, I couldn't remember it. And I couldn't remember it. And then I couldn't remember it. And it just wasn't coming back. Eventually, I just come up with a new question of the day, and that was fine, got that saved, that's not a problem, but it kept annoying me that happened. It's not unheard of. I'll have, I'll go through periods of forgetfulness, especially if my health isn't, tip-top condition. But they're brief, and they're not a permanent thing. And this was definitely the situation there, because both the forgetting instances I mentioned, I was very tired. But it was still annoying me. I didn't want to let it go. And eventually, a day later, it started coming back to me. I thought, wait, was it that? So I went through all my outros, the ones I just recorded, and the ones for the previous week. And then I remembered, this was the question. And simply it's this. Out of those of you who like to ride bicycles, how many of you are comfortable riding in the rain? I myself hate riding in the rain because my feet always slip off the pedals. Although, as I've mentioned, I'll be getting phototherapy again soon to help treat my psoriasis, yet again. And because taxis are very expensive, I'll be taking my bicycle down. I did check, there is somewhere I can chain my bicycle up outside the hospital, so that's fine, no problem there. But I live in Scotland, so rain. It happens a lot of the time. I've bought a replacement inner tube for the bike because one of the tires had a slow leak, so that's all taken care of. I'll have to replace that soon, but that's easily done. It'll be good to go. So, how many of you are comfortable or actually like riding in the rain? Because, as I said, I personally hate it. And as I say that to you, I feel great relief because, yes, this was the outro that I forgot. And I'm so glad I got it back. Not because the outro itself was anything amazing. It's okay, it's a decent question. But it just lets me know my brain isn't melting. Not today, anyway. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.